Everybody, welcome back to Flight Simulator, and this was our next Play 11, and today we'll be talking about British Airways Flight 9. One second. So unfortunately, that's a bit creepy. So it's Flight 11, am I right? So I cannot fix that. Oh, let's just disengage the autopilot. But anyway, so it was the 24th of June 1982, and a British Airways 747 flying from London to Auckland, which stops in Bombay and Kuala Lumpur, Perth and Melbourne in Australia, India and Malaysia, was flying near Jakarta in Indonesia. As you can see there, Jakarta's up here. And they were here. Ignore this other plane, just get out of here. And the plane was flying normally. It obviously isn't here, but yeah, it was just cruising. Most passengers were asleep, and suddenly, just after the captain had left to go to the bathroom, these little pinpricks of light started showing up on the nose of the plane, and then all the engines failed, like completely. All the engines failed though, and I'll just do that myself really quick. Yes, so all the engines have failed. Plane's incredibly silent, and also it started to billow out smoke into the well, not the cockpit, but the cabin. And yeah, the crew kept trying to restart the engines loads of times, and it didn't work, and the plane began to rapidly descend, though continued to descend. And the crew saw what looked like fire streaking out of the engines at the rear of the plane, though, and the whole plane was covered with a white, well, you might be able to see it from the thumbnail, just the white streaks, or kind of blue streaks of light. And yeah, the plane descended by a lot. So the crew tried to restart the engines many times, one of the flight attendants to get the passengers' attention, even though the PA system wasn't working, so they used a megaphone. Also, apparently I read somewhere that some of the passengers were watching a movie when suddenly the screen started to just turn black. But anyway, the plane began to descend, and when they tried to radio ATC, the controllers couldn't hear anything that they were saying. Big problem for them when they're trying to land a massive jumbo jet. But yeah, they lost all 4 engines, and they continued to descend until they got to this altitude here of 12,000 feet, when suddenly all 4 engines just started working again. As you can hear there, the engines began to rev back to life, and because the crew had turned, not that steeply, jeez. So what happened was the crew had turned the plane back towards Java, but jeez, they were going to crash into some mountains. Also, why we were at 12,000 feet. Anyway, they were going to crash into some mountains if they didn't. I cannot force the nose of this plane down. Anyway, they were going to crash into some mountains if they weren't able to get the throttle going again. And then they started to climb again. Then all the engines failed again. And obviously the crew could do nothing. But the plane cleared the mountain, luckily. The crew lowered the plane again after it cleared it, the volcano, And they encountered a final problem though, so they lost all the engines. They'd just been able to fix the control of the plane, they just had all this horror falling 20,000 feet. And then they look out the window and they notice it's almost like it had been scratched, though. And also, when I said that there was fire coming out of the engines, there was no fire alarms or anything like that in the actual plane's cockpit, which obviously meant it wasn't a fire, but I'll get to what caused this later. But yes, the crew couldn't see anything out their windshield, except the captain looked out of the corner of his windshield around here, and he could see perfectly fine there, and it wasn't scratched. So he had to land this jumbo jet with that tiny area there. And let's just approach for landing. We have the gear down now, as you can see. The plane's descending again, moving really fast. 300 knots. And we're descending pretty slowly. I just deployed the speed brakes already. Fortunately, so I tried to use the 747-200 because that was the actual airplane involved in this, but unfortunately there was a British Airways livery for it, but for some reason he put it in the modern one. I just didn't think that was authentic. I don't believe that this is the correct livery though, as the correct one had a crown. This is close enough. This is really this is early 70s. This is right after British Airways formed after BOAC. But yeah, the crew continued to lower nose, and they could barely see, but that's okay because they still had legs, so I guess everything was up and running. Anyway, yeah, there is a pretty good Smithsonian documentary which I'll link in the description, which goes into way more detail than I could possibly ever go to in a video like this. Pull up. There was a hill there, so we had some problems. Shut up, alarms. Yeah, we're going very fast. And I'm aware of that, but I also do not care. The plane didn't have a smooth landing in real life. Are the brakes on? Yep, they are. Can it stop on the runway? Go on. 130. 120. I don't know if we've already overrun. We may have. That's an overrun of the runway. And anyway, there we go. We just landed it. Realistically, might I add. And so after investigation, and I mean, they found things like paint had been scratched off the plane. They found out that the Mount Galunggung volcano nearby had erupted the night that British Airways Flight 9 flew over. The ash was blown south by wing clouds over the sea, which hit the plane. And what it did was the ash got into the hot engine, and basically it dried, and it blocked the engine, causing a compressor stall, which is why it looked like there were huge fire streaks coming out, but there wasn't, basically because the fuel was being run out of the plane, but the fans were not spinning at the front, so no air was being mixed, so it was just coming out. So it was just fuel, which wouldn't have provided enough thrust to keep the plane flying. But yeah, Captain set up this group called the Galunggung Flying Club after this, by the way, and yeah, it was a pretty spectacular event. It happened several years later with the KLM flight over the Aleutian Islands, I believe in Alaska. Same thing happened. and it lost all 4 engines. But that's another story. So that was the reason that they found for it. And once the plane descended, the ash melted again, and thus was able to be churned out the engine by the compressor, as it now had enough force to push the ash out of the way and start spinning and mixing the air with the fuel. So that was how the plane was able to recover, and the crew were able to save everyone. Some random notes here. We leave the cockpit. So I guess we can't. We can find. Well, it's a pretty spacious cockpit actually. It's obviously it's jumboed yet. But anyway, hey guys, thank you for watching this video. Please consider dropping a like down below, and also of course subscribing. And I'll see you in the next video. And as always, good night.